it kind of works the same way similarly with like our conversational dynamic in a way by accident.
I'm playing devil's advocate on you.
We both play the advocate at different times. Honestly, like, and sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, but sometimes it's to create a different depth of conversation about whatever's going on in the game. And I present the same conversation about this season that way. I don't know which hat you're going to be taking on this, but I've heard it from several places that this season overall, considering we've already got Quicksand now we got Sub, Marina, Mariner, Atlantic. Next, we have Marina.
Yep.
We had what, one good card, one mediocre card, and everything else was kind of like.
I'll go the other way. I think
it's a really weak season. I'm sorry.
It's a weak season, like balance wise, in the sense of like, if you only judge cards by this card impacted the metagame hugely, Venus is the only one, and she's not actually that good. She's just popular. But think about it the other way. They made a card that isn't that good that players play a ton of and love and have a blast playing. They made that card synergize with another card in the season that players love and have a blast playing. I'll go the other way on this. This is the first season in 5 months we haven't had an obvious piece of crap best deck. Because they were so good at designing. Just hasn't been one. They're like, if you ask me what the best deck right now is, I think there's several contenders. And like, I definitely don't have a clear locked in answer the way I would have, you know, it's either Sholau or Star-Lord. It's either Carter or TOV. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of options right now. I had like 5 in roughly what I would consider my tier 1, and not much has changed. And it's like, I think that if you only judge cards, here's the thing. What happens is people judge seasons by their outliers, because those are the things that majorly impact the metagame. But if all those outliers end up getting nerfed, then they weren't right in the first place, right? If you say a card can't be good unless it's Star-Lord or Sholau or Storm Horseman or Mother Ascani, if you say that's what's required for a season to be good, that's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, Jubilee Silver Surfer, Namor, Mr. Atlantic, Marina potentially may be a little underpowered, but that's only a mistake if you're a guy who only cares about buying something busted. That's the only context in which it's a mistake, I think. And I think that it is bad to treat a season that didn't make a busted card as if not making a busted card is a problem with that season. Could they have done more for these cards? Yeah, I think so. Did they have maybe a little bit more room than they thought to go taller on Jubilee and Mr. Atlantic? Yeah, I think so. I think they very easily could have. But maybe they didn't know that, and maybe they were just trying to make sure that they didn't do another ridiculous thing. So to me, I've probably had more fun playing Marvel Snap this season than any other season in the last year. Not year, in the last 6 months. And I feel like Marvel Snap's enjoyment, my enjoyment of Marvel Snap on the whole has been trending upward since the Sholau and Star-Lord nerf. That's how I feel. There's obviously no data behind that, but that is how I feel.
I think it's interesting where I don't know if I 100% agree, only because I look at the cards of the past couple of seasons, right? You think about Zombie Scarlet Witch, Weapon X. Yeah, I'm going a little further, but like Sholau, Star-Lord, and Sabanor. I'd even put Shadowlands Daredevil in this conversation, but like most of them created new decks entirely for the most part.
Are you knocking Venus because you don't think those decks are new?
No,
I think them being good is new.
No, season pass. I'm talking the season pass first.
Oh.
The season passes always seem to hit better when it creates a new type of deck.
Why do you think that?
They're more well received.
Interesting. That would be the opposite of, I'm not saying I'm right. That would be the opposite of how I would think about it. I would think that when I make a season pass, what I want is for it to be as open-ended as possible. I would want it to be more of a general card so that someone who picked it up, no matter where they are along the collection track, no matter what they're building around, would be able to play it. What I wouldn't want are things that require archetype-specific cards to succeed. I think a great example is when Surtur dropped and you just needed Scar. You couldn't play the deck without Scar. And at the time, you just couldn't buy him. It's gotten a lot better since then, but that was a real low point for the old system, I think.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the example of this to me, where it's like, I would almost always rather release a card like Jeff, who is going to be pretty good in whatever you put him in, than release a card like Shadowlands Daredevil. Or I guess Shadowlands Daredevil was a little unspecific because he's still just a bunch of stats, but like, and Sabanur. I would take a Jeff over an Sabanur any day of the week.
I would take Jeff over Sabanur as token expenditure. If I'm spending $10, like actual currency, I feel better getting something completely new rather than really something that's diverse. Because
I would not have expected it.
I'm thinking about it from the idea of a broader player base where more people obtain cards free to play than they do spend. And
so I want to be clear. When I say I wouldn't have expected it, I don't mean that I consider it impossible for someone to think this.
No, I know.
What I mean
never
is
assumed
like
that.
I wouldn't have expected that to be something you think to be a majority opinion. That's what I mean.
Because if I'm gonna spend on the game in any capacity, I'm looking at it as I have a targeted purchase, which means this will be used for blank, versus the Snap Packs system, which says I would rather have more generalities in it. I would rather have a Jeff as one of the options I could potentially hit in a Snap Pack versus a Spider Punk, versus, that's a bad example, versus a Weapon X, which is a very specific deck. You know what I mean?
Well, to my mind, Weapon X is a failure in part because it is so specific. I think Destroy is kind of the only archetype that if I were doing things like this, I would feel comfortable making a season pass for, because it's just such a big chunk of any, like, my impression is that, like, if you look at basically any slice of the metagame in like the middle of the population curve, there's just going to be some significant Destroyer representation. It's just a deck that has fans and players, and we like Lambie used to call them Destroy Bros. Like it's a real thing. And I think that outside of very specifically a Destroy scaler, I'd be really wary of putting anything like that on the season pass, in large part because to me, the season pass's goal is appeal, and I just don't think that many people approach it the way you do. I don't think people approach it like, it's one of the most common pieces of advice you have to give as a content creator is like, don't just buy cards, buy decks, because it's not the default method for people to approach it that way. And so I think that the way they design season passes should accommodate how people actually are, which is to say, I would vastly prefer they made season passes that were a little more generically applicable and a little less specific. If you show me two cards, let's say they each have the same power level, magic power level of 7. One of them is like a card that like goes in a bunch of decks, but is definitely not the best card in any of them. And the other one is a card that could be really good if you had several other Series 5s. My instinct is the one that goes in a bunch of decks is a season pass, and the one that is the other one is the one you sell. That's my instinct of like how you would structure this. Because I think that the goal of the season pass is to allow anyone at any space on the collection track to pick up this card and do well with it. It's not necessarily for that card to be super busted. It's for this card to be good enough that you can do stuff with it. When I think about cards that are super limited and specific that I don't like on the season pass, Star-Lord. I don't like Star-Lord on the season pass. I don't think he makes sense there. Like I like Weapon X, Star-Lord, Nimrod was a season pass, Phoenix Force was a season pass. These are things that I don't like on the season pass. The stuff I would like to see on the season pass that wasn't on the season pass. I think Surge would be a great card for a season pass. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Jeff, Mr. Fantastic First Steps stuff. And like, yeah, when you overshoot on those, it's really bad. But yes, Mr. Fantastic was on the season pass, and current Jeff is on the season pass. But like,
I know what you mean.
I think they do a pretty good job of getting those cards on the season pass a lot of the time, to be honest with you. I think that the mistakes are more rare than the correct decisions. Things like Star-Lord and Weapon X are few and far between, in large part because they're normally pretty good about this.
And I think, and to be clear too, because I know I'm on record talking about this in a different light. This is an opinion of mine that has changed and evolved because I originally was in the same mindset as you, where I would have preferred more broad to be on the season pass and more niche to be, do I use my tokens or not?
Yep.
That changed because of how snap packs now work. Because snap packs give you these concentrated pools, I would rather have more niche individual things in there where if I'm going to get it that week, I'm going to get it that week. But if I'm going to go into a random pool,
you'd rather have the more generic cards in the random pools to even out the variance of it.
Correct. Exactly. So if I'm good, because no matter what do we always say about the season pass when people ask? You don't get the season pass because you want the card. You get the season pass because you want the season pass. It's a good value. So if you're going to spend, it's irrelevant what you put in there. It's almost over putting too much value into the season pass when you put a generically good card in there. It actually is probably a little bit smarter to put something niche in there specifically, because it is saying, hey, you get a whole new deck because you get to build around this card. You get to build around En Sabanur. You get to build around Zombie Scarlet Witch. That I think is really intriguing.
Assuming a lot of rationality from your consumers. I think that like I think it's an inherited a lot of rationality. Yeah, like it's assuming that like us saying that matters, and I don't think that's necessarily true. It's assuming that the player base knows to do this and will buy a season pass even if they're not excited by the card, which I don't think is necessarily true. It's also assuming that there's not a ton of value in converting someone to being a season pass customer, which I think likely is true, because the purpose of those bundles and things like that, the cheap stuff, is
completely different conversation. Oh yeah.
Right, but when they design this stuff, they probably have to think about it, right? And I think largely my instinct is that I'm not sure that reducing the RNG in that snap pack pool is actually good for either A, people, or B, I don't know. Something about this conversation reminds me of the conversations in Magic around Mana Screw, where it's like, just take out the downside stuff, right? Yeah. Just take out the downside. And it's like, it turns out if you remove the valleys, sometimes you also remove the peaks. So well, like the more you smooth 100%. It out, the less, to
be clear, there are different perspectives that you need to vary in here. I'm speaking from the perspective of if I'm a consumer, of course, I'm always going to want the generalities of that pool to be a higher baseline of good that are more diverse, because if I'm throwing my tokens to the wind and saying I'm going to spend 5,000 tokens and just see which of the 5 I'm going to get that I happen to have in that pool at this moment, well, yeah, I want it to be something that's a little bit more specific, a little more broad, because I spent 6,000 on something specific that I wanted.
Right, but my point is that I feel like what's happening is you're evaluating it from your perspective, which is so highly informed that you got hired by the company that makes the game. I just think that while what you're saying is likely true for you, the amount of customers who share that perspective and have that same level of plugged inness is probably vanishingly low. And more than that, are exactly the people who are already so invested that you won't actually be reaching them by doing this because they're already doing it. The people that you want to reach are lower propensity, lower levels of information people who may not know all of the like math about buying the season pass or whatever. They don't know any of that. They just know that's a sick Jeff and the card looks good. And I think that like those people are the people who, if you're thinking about like which customers to serve, those people are the people you got to serve.
I'm sitting here smiling because you're speaking perfectly from a marketing point of view.
Yeah, they hired me for a reason, dog. I'm a genius.
No,
I'm the smartest man alive.
No, I just, and I say that because, you know, obviously you did just join the marketing team with us. So on that aspect of it, if you're looking at it through that kind of lens, yeah, of course, if you're trying to, it depends on what you're trying to do with the season pass if you're a game company versus if you're watching it as a player and you're making decisions as a player, what player are you? So they're two very specific things that you have to consider. I'm speaking from the perspective of those who are probably listening to this podcast, which means you're invested. You've been either following my content, you've been playing a while, you've been following your content, playing a while. These are people who understand the game and the system. If I'm using the season pass as a marketing tool to get people in, you're damn fucking right. Jeff the baby shark in a dolphin costume is going on the season pass over Venus because it makes a hell of a lot more sense because people know Jeff and they love Jeff. So Jeff.
I mean, I think you could argue that the other way because Venus is incredibly attractive. However, I think that I don't necessarily love this being like, oh, you're thinking from a marketing perspective. Because what I'm really trying to do, this is like the core of what I'm trying to do here is, I bring a perspective that is extremely high level, high information, plugged in. I'm not trying to like, you know, blow myself here, but the amount that I am invested in this game is drastically higher than many other people. I would imagine I am on the 99th percentile of knowing things about this game and being invested in this game. That's not to say I'm the single most, but I'm very up there. Yeah. And that means that if I try to argue things from my perspective, I will fundamentally be missing where the normal person is at. And so a lot of the work I've been doing recently has been like, how do I meet people where they are at effectively? Mm-hmm. And so this is not me trying to be like, oh, I'm Mr. Marketer. It's trying to say like, I think there's a large cohort of people for whom it actually is much more beneficial for the card to be general. It actually is much more beneficial for the card to go in whatever deck they're playing. Because if it goes in a specific deck, they might not have the cards for it. That sucks. I didn't even get a season pass this month, right? Like, I think that like, generally my view on this is make your funnel as big as possible. That's marketing speak. But you make your funnel as big as possible, right? I don't want to start with a smaller funnel that maybe has like more suction in it. I'm not sure where this analogy is going. Funnels don't have suction, but you get where I'm going with this. We're going to use the analogy of a whirlpool. Imagine you're Mr. Atlantic and you have 2 whirlpools. And you're trying to catch as many people in your whirlpools as you possibly can. One of them is larger than the other, but doesn't pull down as much. But it's okay because it makes up for that by being larger. Like I don't know. I think that like it's less of a cynical marketing thing and more just like, I think Marvel Snap has not done an amazing job at what does our customer base actually want? And they should probably do that.
Well, I do think they do that, and I think we'll kind of loop back to put a pin in this aspect of the thought, talking about the changes that happened to character mastery. But I do think that there is there's basically 3 pools of people that you have to think about with the season pass. The people that are just buying the season pass blindly because they're just getting the season pass to get the season pass, and they're repeat purchasers, and that's it. That entire group you have to toss aside. Then you have to figure out the balance between who is giving us return every single season in larger masses, the newer audience or the niche audience, basically looking at our 2 different perspectives. Sometimes you have to lean one way, sometimes you have to lean the other way. And this is based on looking at how the season passes are working in that sense too. Spider-Punk, popular character, people know the character, generically, pretty widely applicable card. Jeff the Baby Dolphin, same aspect, little bit broader.
I think Spider-Punk, for the record, just want to stop on Spider-Punk. I think that guy's genius. Because it is a generically applicable card that also has very specific applications in a specific archetype. So you can play it as either of them. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Spider-Punk it is a perfect middling of what we're talking about. It is not so archetype specific that it replaces things in that archetype. It is just really good in that archetype. And it's also a very valuable stat stick. Exactly perfect to me as a season pass card. And I think Jeff is a lot like that.
Right. They're very similar in that sense. You could even make the argument for like Merlin. Same way. People know the name Merlin. They may not know Marvel Merlin, but they know the name Merlin. They know that there's a sorcerer involved and there's incantations and there's magic and there's things that happen. Very much kind of applies in that same breath. Mr. Fantastic First Steps. You know the name Mr. Fantastic most likely. It's a long time popular lore style name. There's been movies. There was a movie coming out. It just, though, that's when you're using the season pass for a new audience. That's when you're trying to say, hey, look, we have it based around this character. And there's a time and a place for that as a game company. There's then the other group, which seems to be based on at least personal assessment of the season passes. The other group, which is I want niche, they're clearly spending more regularly because you're seeing that more so versus the new group.
I guess what I want to know is, I would imagine our comments sort of like understanding that I'll take all of you with a grain of salt, because by virtue of listening to this, you are undoubtedly confirming that you are of a level of investment in this game that makes you a non-representative sample size.
As an audience, yeah.
We're going to call this market research. It's not. If you agree with Guest on this, I would like to hear your perspective in the comments. I would like to hear if you're like, I want more specific archetypal cards in the season pass. I would like to hear it. So leave it in the comments and I will try to read them.
Vice versa as well. Because
if you agree with me, just take comfort in knowing that you're right. You're good.
But I would like to know. This is 2 people on the podcast. I want to know shit too. But
but we're right and you're wrong, and so there's a qualitative difference.
The season passes say otherwise.